Schedule 1 is a powerhouse of a game, and I mean that in more ways than one. It's rocked the indie game world and is one of the top crime sim games out there, and on paper, the game kinda sounds like a chore. I mean, you wake up each day, follow a routine, and you perform the same repetitive tasks over and over again. It's objectively mundane, but I don't think I'm the only one that feels like there's something deeply, dangerously, well, addictive about this loop. While most games try to distract you from the grind, Schedule 1 leans into it. It weaponizes boredom to put you in a state of flow that most big-budget titles try desperately to create. So how does a game about work become more engaging than an epic quest? Join me as we explore the psychology of weaponized boredom and discover how Schedule 1 turns cold optimization into a therapeutic masterpiece. For many, Schedule 1 is a game that needs no introduction. It was one of the biggest indie titles of 2025 and became the premier crime simulation game next to Grand Theft Auto 5 and Payday 2. For the uninitiated, Schedule 1 is a game that revolves around the production and distribution of illegal substances. You start out as a small-time dealer who's down on his luck in the town of Hyland Point. With the help of your Uncle Nelson, you quickly learn the tricks of the trade and make the connections necessary to start a buzzing enterprise. The game is incredibly detailed, having the player go through the process of growing, synthesizing, packaging, and distributing their product in order to earn income. Income is then used to purchase better equipment and properties to scale the business and serve even more customers. This is where the gameplay loop becomes solidified, but not for long. You see, most people would consider Schedule 1 to be a simulation game through and through, but I actually think it's two genres wrapped into one. The game starts out as a sort of action-adventure game. Sure, you're simulating the act of growing and dealing, but in the early game you're also evading the police, tracking down new customers, offering free samples, moving money around, and with the rival cartel update you're now having to deal with and compete with the Benzies. But as you progress through the game, you discover the game's deadly secret weapon: automation. Eventually, you don't need to do all of this grunt work yourself. You can get your employees to do it for you. Tired of selling product on your own? You can hire dealers for that. The only thing you need to do once your automation is set up is simply deliver the necessary materials to your staff, and that's what you'll spend most of the endgame doing: deliveries and inventory management. On the surface, this sounds awful and incredibly boring, but when you're there actually doing it, it doesn't feel that way. The routine, the satisfaction of a job well done, and the constant presence of something that needs doing captivates you. You just can't put the game down. You're in the zone. Just one more run. Just one more delivery. Just one more day of dealing. There's a flow here that's hard to break out of. Before you know it, the game pulls a Minecraft on you and you've lost the last 6 hours to it. And you don't feel bad about it either. In fact, you had fun. But a different kind of fun than we usually think of when we talk about video games. Today, we're going to talk about that kind of fun. How does a game that goes from making you a small-time dealer against the world to a full-time delivery driver manage to keep you so hooked? We're going to break down the psychology, game design principles, and unique little twists that accomplish this. So let's get started. In the early 1930s, a psychologist by the name of B.F. Skinner created a device called the Operant conditioning chamber. Skinner wanted to understand how animals behave in nature, and specifically how they choose to behave. However, the open-ended environment of, well, nature is incredibly hard to predict, and thus hard to perform repeatable and testable experiments. The Operant conditioning chamber, later colloquially known as the Skinner box, was a solution to this problem. The concept was simple. An animal is placed in a box where it must learn to operate levers or respond to audio or light stimuli for a reward. Experiments run with the Skinner box would later leave Skinner to conclude something we all know to be a bit obvious today. Behavior that results in reward is likely to be repeated, whereas behavior that is met with punishment is less likely to be repeated. Skinner box is a term used in the games industry a lot by designers, by players, and by critics. Typically, it's usually a negative term to describe a shallow game experience that seeks to hack the most primitive parts of our brain in order to keep us playing and, more importantly, keep us paying. But this doesn't always have to be a negative term. Schedule 1, in my opinion, is a Skinner box of sorts. You perform a series of actions and routines for a reward, in this case money. As you learn how to interact with the game's systems, you start repeating the actions that earn you the most reward and avoiding actions that result in little reward or even punishment. But that's not the only reward. Schedule 1 takes this concept of the Skinner box and flips it on its head. The actual gameplay is the reward. The tasks, the routines, the experimentation, that's actually where the fun and the reward lives. But putting you in a different kind of Skinner box is only the start of the psychological tricks. As Schedule 1 begins to teach you how to interact with its systems and be a successful dealer, you soon discover its core loop. Grow and synthesize product, package product, set up deals, complete deals, rinse and repeat. Then the automation begins. You start incorporating supply drop-offs and equipping your dealers with product. This is where the compulsion loops begin. A compulsion loop is a set of repetitive actions and mechanics in a game that results in a habitual and addictive user experience. The core loop describes the moment-to-moment gameplay and is what the designers intentionally create. The compulsion loop, on the other hand, is the psychological hook that makes you want to keep repeating that core loop. In Schedule 1, you design the compulsion loop yourself. The game instructs you on what to do and gives you an environment to do it in, but how you achieve it is up to you. You can buy properties and set them up however you like, choose what products you will or will not make, experiment with different mixes, and craft your own standard operating procedures. Over time, you build a routine. Your routine that you just can't stop repeating. You, the player, have developed your own compulsion loop. But why does it feel so good to play? What about the loop makes it so compulsive? Outer Order, Inner Calm. That's the name of a book published by Gretchen Rubin. In it, she discusses her theory on happiness and how the organization and decluttering of our external lives is the key to creating an inner sense of peace and calm.
Just on the most superficial level, life is easier. You can find things. When we get rid of the stuff that's kind of clogging our vision, we often feel more engaged with what we have.
This might make sense to a lot of you. A messy room makes for a messy mind. If your room is in utter chaos and disarray, then it stands to reason your mental state will reflect that too. But Zen, what does this have to do with video games? Well, this book kind of stuck with me as a designer, and I often thought of ways of how you can apply this principle in game design. Remember how I mentioned earlier that games can have different kinds of fun? In my previous video about cozy games, I explained how much of the games in question depended on repetitive loops without substantial reward that simply couldn't captivate players due to a lack of friction and shallow mechanics. However, there is a way to get exactly what the cozy slop games are going for. It's called flow, and if you're a creative person, you know exactly what this term means. Flow is a mental state of complete and utter immersion, energized focus, and enjoyment in activity. It's that moment where you're drawing, making music, or playing a game, and suddenly the outside world around you has disappeared. You're in the zone. You don't want to stop. You can't stop. This is almost a euphoric state, and is the very reward that most creatives are chasing when they engage in their craft. Schedule 1 is a masterclass in creating a gameplay loop that promotes flow. This is why you can start the game up in the afternoon and then realize the sun is down by the time you're done playing. So how does Outer Order Inner Calm fall into this? Simple. We design our games to intentionally put the player in a flow state. There's a number of ways we can do this. By using a minimalist approach to art and UI, we can remove unnecessary UI elements like health bars in favor of more diegetic UI elements. We can focus on creating a serene environment that seeks to immerse the player. Schedule 1 does this quite well. The only UI elements on the screen are things you always need to know. There's no health bar and no minimap, but you can bring these things up on your phone. But honestly, the best way to figure out how to navigate the town is to simply start navigating it, and the game world, from the art style to the music, is designed to compel you to do just that. Instead of adding more mechanics, we can remove one when we introduce a new one. While Schedule 1 doesn't do this explicitly, there is a semblance of this. As you move on to a more automation-focused gameplay style, a lot of earlier primitive mechanics are used far less often or are in some cases completely abandoned by the player. By limiting the number of complex choices the player must make, we can allow the player to focus more on the core experience. But all of these methods of applying Outer Order Inner Calm come with a risk. The risk of making something totally uninspired and shallow that it will get dubbed as cozy slop by players and YouTubers. So how do we fix this? We create a calm. We remove or limit time pressure. We embrace negative space to avoid cluttering the world and overwhelming the player, and we create soothing interactions that are oddly satisfying. Now that we're on this train of thought, let's really think about Schedule 1. Schedule 1 offers some time pressure by making you complete deals within the block of time you yourself have selected, but removes the time pressure even further by making the only consequence of failure a simple loss in revenue and customer satisfaction. Many of the buildings in Schedule 1 are empty and can't be entered, and that's perfectly fine. They exist to help sell that this is a real town you're in. Finally, there's other things we can do. We can play mini-games on the TV, pick up trash, and go gambling at the casino. These are all oddly satisfying tasks that let us take a break from the monotony of drug dealing. And did I mention the music? I'm telling you, when I played this game, there was no better feeling than just running around this town while jamming out to this. Every single component of this game comes together to create a relaxed, soothing, and comfortable experience for the player without a lot of stress, and that's important for creating a flow state. There's minimal opportunity for disruption, letting the player get lost in the loop for as long as they find it satisfying. That said, the game isn't completely without friction. It's just friction that becomes easy to manage. The cops and the checkpoints are a real problem for a would-be dealer in Hyland Point, but after learning the way of the town and internalizing the police department's own routines, they're easily circumvented. And it's not like there's a game over scenario if you get arrested. You simply lose your product and have to pay a steep fine. This is a frustrating setback for sure, but not game ending. You only need to spend some time recouping before you can get right back into the loop. Friction also exists in the way the game evolves over time. You buy new properties, you hire employees, and you get new equipment. These events are still disruptions, but they're positive ones. They force you to recalibrate your entire operation and iterate upon the loop you've built for yourself. That disruption serves as a kind of reset, which breaks your engagement temporarily, recalibrates you, and then causes you to get hooked on a new loop all over again. That's the genius behind Schedule 1, but there's still an incredible risk here. A dark shadow of human behavior that looms over you as the game's systems start to become second nature to you. Given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. That's the quote of legendary game design director Soren Johnson of Civilization fame. It's a profound quote, and incredibly true. As a player, you're fighting a losing battle against your very nature. Human beings love patterns, and by extension we love routines. The predictability, consistency, and stability of a routine is what promotes a general sense of safety to primitive man during a time where he hadn't mastered the world and the world cared not for him. Early humans were hardwired to develop routines and cling to as much survivable predictability as humanly possible. Unfortunately, that's a trait that's been hard to abandon even in our modern age. Ralph Koester, an American game designer and author of A Theory of Fun for Game Design, said it best. This is what games are for. They teach us things so that we can minimize risk and know what choices to make. Phrased another way, the destiny of games is to become boring, not to be fun. Those of us who want games to be fun are fighting a losing battle against the human brain because fun is a process and routine is its destination. That's a mouthful for sure, but that entire quote is important because it captivates a dark and grim reality that we as gamers often don't want to face. One day, the game we love is going to end up becoming boring. For example, I loved the Spyro games as a kid. One of my favorite games was Spyro, Year of the Dragon for the PlayStation. I didn't love this game for its mechanics or for the plot or for really any conventional reason. I loved it because of how it made me feel when I played it for the first time. There was a hype to this game, an energy that just felt amazing to be introduced to. The newness of the game was an unforgettable experience, and as I dove into playing it, I had a blast. Of course, that novelty wore off and the game became second nature to me. After I put the game down, I spent the rest of my gaming years chasing that feeling of newness. I so desperately wanted to feel what Spyro, Year of the Dragon made me feel. Some of you can probably relate to that story and have your own version of it. If you do, let me know in the comments. I want to know what game gave you that feeling. But back to our point here. The bottom line is this. As the game becomes known, it will lose its novelty and you will inevitably be sparked to seek out other games for a refreshed sense of that newness all of your favorite games once instilled you with. The designer attempts to outpace you as you race towards knowing the game. That might sound pretty depressing, but there's actually plenty of things we can do as developers that can turn this around in our favor, and Schedule 1 has mastered it. The Red Queen's race is a concept that has been used and discussed to describe a number of subjects from social justice to evolutionary biology. It references a scene in Lewis Carroll's Through the Looking Glass in which Alice and the Red Queen are running as fast as they can, but remain in the same place. The Red Queen's race was once referenced by Jay-Z to describe the struggle for black liberation, by Steve Blank to describe the United States falling behind its adversaries in intelligence technology, and even became the name of a hypothesis in evolutionary biology to describe how individual creatures adapt as their species progresses through evolution. It's a novel concept, and easy for one to understand when it's used as a metaphor. But I've never seen it used to describe game design, and I feel it's incredibly fitting. I hinted at this previously, but the player and the designer are engaged in a race. The player wants to learn the game and eventually optimize it. The quest for optimization in a game is fun, but once the optimization is found, the fun fades. The designer wants to keep you from reaching that point. I think as designers, what we want to do is make the task of discovering the optimal strategy in a game Sisyphean in nature. Schedule 1 doesn't quite achieve this, but I think it takes a step in the right direction. Like I mentioned in Act 1, Schedule 1 is actually 2 genres in one, but how it executes that multi-genre feeling is actually genius. You start off in a more action-adventure environment and begin to learn the ropes of the drug trade in Hyland Point. You hire dealers, build relationships, meet the Benzies, and balance the act of defending yourself with the dealing side of things. But right when these mechanics and this set of routine becomes second nature to you, a disruption happens. A new property, hiring new employees, buying a vehicle. These things make you have to take a break and reset your routine, and you may end up building an entirely new one as a result. This is where our Red Queen metaphor comes into play. This is the game, the designer, keeping you in place. Your progress towards solving the game has become frustrated and reset, and you've essentially remained in place towards that end. Eventually, you have so many properties and employees that they all need supplies and tools to work with, and an entire day can be spent just ordering and managing those supplies. At some point, your business scales so much that you're essentially acting as a full-time delivery driver from your warehouse to your operations centers. This is where the game becomes a business logistics simulator rather than a drug-dealing crime simulator or adventure game. Right when you've learned how to play the game, it shifts it into an entirely different experience for you to learn and optimize. This is where Schedule 1 delivers its masterstroke, embracing your desire for optimization. It leans into it and almost challenges you to do it. Let's talk about the design fundamentals of Schedule 1 and how those fundamentals influence the transition from a dealer adventure to business logistics sim. We talked earlier about how we as designers can take the drive for optimization and embrace it, while also keeping the player from achieving it for as long as possible. Schedule 1 embraces this by not only transitioning the game into an optimization sandbox once you learn it, but also providing so much depth and complexity that finding the true optimal path for the game is almost a moot point. What does it mean to optimize Schedule 1? Is it making the most money as fast as possible? Is it finding the most profitable strain for each product type? Or is it simply creating a system that results in as much product as possible being sold per day? All of these strategies have their own ups and downs. Not only that, but it would take a very long time to actually discover and confirm the best methods for these strategies. There's plenty of ways to make money, and one would argue the casino is actually the fastest way to earn your fortune in the game. Finding the most profitable drug type might be an endgame goal, but it's not quite an optimization path because oftentimes the most expensive and profitable strains require several ingredients and several steps to make. So are you really making money any faster? As for selling as much product per day as you can, that sounds like the simplest approach, but the game does all that it can to frustrate your effort to discover the optimal pathing in this endeavor. To top it all off, like I said before, the game genre completely shifts on you by the end. To demonstrate this, we're going to take a journey through a playthrough of Schedule 1 and see this in action. For brevity, we're going to skip the tutorial section. We start in Hyland Point with the trailer we managed to escape the raid on Uncle Nelson's place in. We've just enough to get started making some simple product, but we still don't know the way of Hyland Point. That's where Uncle Nelson comes in. Calling us from what we can assume is prison, Nelson teaches us the basics of how to survive as a dealer in this town. However, just as he sets us up with some cash, our RV is blown up, along with any supplies and equipment we had inside of it. If you've played the game before, you probably thought to just take this stuff with you before the RV blows up, which is what we did here. Even if you don't take this step, you'll be able to buy some equipment with the money Uncle Nelson gives you, but your plans will grow at a slower rate. Investigating the RV reveals a note left to us by the Benzies, a powerful cartel that holds much of the influence in Hyland Point. They don't quite like the idea of new competition moving into their town, but we can't really worry about that right now. We're homeless in a town we have no knowledge of and no connections in. It's time to get to work. With the money we've been given to get us started, we've been able to secure a hotel room in town to serve as our new base of operations. Uncle Nelson starts hooking us up with connections so we can get supplies for our product and get to work. While we wait for our first plants to grow, we take some of that product we had at the start of the game and start handing out free samples to secure our first customers. The hotel room is nice, but we already know we're going to need more space if we want to amp up production. After securing $800 to our name, we can go talk to Miss Ming at the Chinese restaurant to purchase a room. We get to work moving everything over, buy some new supplies and equipment to help us ramp up production, and since we still have access to the hotel room, we can either use it to grow more plants or just as a backup base, especially if we need to get into a bed quickly after curfew hits. I chose the latter route. It's by this point that I just get lost in how comfortable this game feels. I often forget about the heavy, dark subject matter we're dealing with. The lighting, the music, and the chill nature of the gameplay loop is calming, almost therapeutic. This is something I treasure in games, so I hang on to this feeling every new playthrough for as long as it lasts. Complete enough deals, and you'll be able to start hiring dealers. This is our first big flow reset of the game. We may have gotten used to the routine of growing our product, waiting for customers, and scheduling a bunch of deals to occur at once. If you're confident, you can choose to do this at late night hours, which will maximize your revenue with curfew bonuses. But once a dealer is thrown into the mix, we now need to assign him customers and supply him with product. This changes our routine considerably, and now we have to learn how to be an effective dealer while also making our hired dealer as effective as possible. After all, we paid him a sign-on bonus and offer him a cut of every sale. This is where the wheels are set in motion and the Red Queen's race begins. After a few more successful deals and level ups, we'll soon get access to the wretched hive of scum and villainy that is the warehouse. This is where the game finally takes us to a new level. No longer a single wannabe criminal in a new town, we're somebody now. The guys in the warehouse are able to set us up with weapons, new equipment to make products, and of course, some staff. Our new base of operations at the Sweatshop can support one employee, so we hire a botanist to take over our growing operations. This is a significant paradigm shift for us because now we're able to spend less time managing our plants and more time packaging and distributing. It couldn't have come at a better time either, because this is the point where we get introduced to mixing. We're able to mix the basic products we buy from suppliers with various ingredients we get from the gas station in order to create new strains of product with different effects. Before, we seemed to be running at a pace that resulted in progress, but here, at this point, is where we realize we never moved an inch. There's so much complexity once mixing is involved. Customers have preferences and what effects they like products to have, and different mixes result in different profit margins. There's so much information to consider here, and so much opportunity for more experimentation and discovery. A lot of players by this point will spend many hours making friends with the mixer. Once we have a few simple mixes, we can start taking down the basic products from the market and start putting up our more sophisticated products in their place. By this point, we've probably accumulated quite a bit of money and can afford our next property, the Bungalow. This is a significant change and a very large disruption to the game. The Bungalow is a house with 3 main rooms, and by now, we've been pointed to start making crystal. That's right, we've hit the Breaking Bad arc of the game. We're going to need quite a bit of equipment and several staff members. The Sweatshop only allowed us to have 1 employee, but the Bungalow allows us to have 5. For this playthrough, I turned the Bungalow into an all-out blue sky production haven. I set up an oven, chem station, a couple mixers, and a bunch of shelving. For employees, we need 3 chemists and 2 handlers. After experimenting and deciding what strains of rock we want to make, it's time to set up our automation. Once that's done, we have a fully automated crystal factory. This is a critical point in the game, as it's just thrown us into the realm of automaticity. Now that we understand how employees work and how we can fully automate production of a single product, this is something that we're going to inevitably cling to and look for opportunities to optimize at every corner. Our empire is growing by the minute, and it's only going to get easier from here. Or is it? At some point between the last couple of chapters in this playthrough, we'll have gotten a call from the Benzies family to meet and discuss the future of our business relationship. They'll try to extend an olive branch, apologizing for torching our RV and asking for a simple business arrangement, one that ensures our protection but disadvantages our business. We limit ourselves to one section of the town and make weekly deliveries to the Benzies Manor. If we take the deal, our safety is ensured, but our scaling ends here. We'll be unable to progress or unlock any new parts of the town and new customers. If we refuse the deal, we'll begin an all-out war with the Benzies over influence and control, but we'll be able to continue scaling our business. This is where the Red Queen strikes. If you take the deal, that moment becomes the literal embodiment of the Red Queen's race. You must run as fast as you possibly can in order to stay in the same place. The Benzies will be unkind if you miss a delivery, and if you want to progress any distance at all, you'll have to run twice as fast, and that means going to war. It might be advantageous to actually take the deal with the Benzies at first. You'll be able to shore up a decent chunk of savings that will allow you to build up product reserves peacefully for a time, and also stock up on the most important product from here on out: firepower. Once we're in a good spot, we can break off the deal with the Benzies, and this will start the conflict. From here on out, if we want to expand our influence and control, we need to decrease the influence the Benzies have over that part of town. This can be done by using graffiti to mark our territory, remove rival graffiti, take out the Benzies dealers, and thwart the raids they send after us. This becomes a very critical part of the game that once again resets our entire routine and interrupts it at several instances. Not only do you have to worry about the Benzies raiding you and disrupting your supply chain, but you still have to worry about the police too. That's 2 hostile factions we now have to work around. Once we learn how to coexist with the cartel, peaceful or otherwise, we get back into the flow of things and likely at this point purchase the barn. This means you'll have run into the necessity of money laundering, another addition to our routine that we'll need to exercise religiously. A note about money laundering, because it's fascinating from a game designer's point of view. The game is telling you that making money isn't enough. Cash, contrary to popular belief, is not king. Some shops want the cold hard cash, and others prefer the convenience of electronic funds. This is the game telling you making money doesn't mean anything until you've done the paperwork, and that's about as business sim as it gets. Anyway, and side note, the barn is a game changer, literally. If the Sweatshop and the Bungalow served as our introduction to automaticity, then the barn is the test. The potential for automation and min-maxing production is staggering with this property. If you're new to the game, it will take you hours upon hours to figure out how these systems work, let alone optimize them. What you see here is basically how I set up the barn every time. It specializes in one product and one product only: weed. The goal for me personally is to get a decently priced mix that can apply to every type of seed we can buy. This allows me to quickly produce a ton of products so that I never run out of something to sell. The approach you might take at this point in the game could be entirely different, but the overall design point remains the same. The Red Queen strikes again and gives you something new to sink your teeth into. By this point in the game, you've learned enough about it and its systems to instinctively know you want to optimize and min-max, and this is the point where the game dares you to try. Now that you have a ton of product you can reliably sell, a whole swath of new opportunities opens up as you improve your relationships with the various townsfolk. We get access to new dealers, new suppliers with new products, and new opportunities. As we get more and more people on our side, take out the Benzies, and get more control over the town, our rise becomes inevitable. Literally nothing is going to stop us from taking over Hyland Point from the sewers to the suburbs. That said, as we unlock customers in the suburbs, we expose ourselves to a clientele that has more, well, refined tastes. The stuff we've been making at the quality we've been making it isn't going to cut it. We need more. We have access to coca seed by now, but we need something to do with it and a place to do it in. That puts our sights on the penultimate prize, the Docks Warehouse. The Docks Warehouse is the ultimate test of your understanding of the game's systems. More space, more staff, more products, more money. The potential here is limitless, and you're going to want to do everything you can to maximize every pixel of this space. For my approach, I set up the coca farm here and create an entire streamlined operation to produce cocaine. But there's also some additional verticality to this place, so I decide to use it for a mushroom farm too. By this point, we're working with bricks of product. You see, the way dealers operate is they actually break individual pieces of product from packaging like jars and bricks in a way that we actually can't do as the player character. So if we load up our dealers with a bunch of bricks, they'll be able to sell on the streets for far longer, hold more product, and sell more efficiently than we could. Once your dealers are set up and you're on the move, the revenue stream becomes just ridiculous. You may find yourself easily making $20,000 per day between you and your dealers. But this is the exact moment where the game takes a cynical turn. Stop and think for just a second. What have you become? The start of the game was chill. We were just growing some plants and selling them for some cash that we really needed. We were skirmishing with the cops, battling for our turf, and spending our free time playing Snake on the TV. But now, everything has changed. Our business scaled to ridiculous proportions. It's everything you can do just to keep your facility supplied with ingredients. Much of the day's hours are spent just running supplies between the facilities, unpacking vans, delivering goods to dealers, and then fitting in our own deals at the end of the night if time permits. And that's just it. There's no time for anything else anymore. There's no time for you anymore. This is the point where the genre shift occurs. You are now playing a business logistics simulator, maximizing profit, reducing cost, and streamlining operations. This is where the game reveals its sinister trap. You can't stop playing. There's always something to do, and it's very difficult to know when you're at a good stopping point. You're not even thinking about what you're doing at this point, you're just doing it. You've gone through the same loop of tasks for several in-game days now, and while it sounds like it should just be absolutely boring, monotonous, exhausting, and miserable, it isn't. You're having fun, or perhaps you're not really having fun at all, but you're having a good time. You're relaxed. You're not thinking about anything else. The outside world has melted around you. You're in the zone. The game's intended state of flow has washed over you. This feeling you have, the inability to stop a loop of tasks because there's always something that needs finishing, is called the Zeigarnik effect. It's a psychological principle that explains a phenomena where people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks far better than ones they've finished. The brain creates mental tension around open loops, keeping them active until closure is achieved. The term was coined by psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik when she observed restaurant staff who recalled unpaid orders but forgot ones that were paid for. Hey everybody, this is Editor Zenny here. So I did a little more research into the Zeigarnik effect, and it turns out it's a little controversial because there's some studies that have been published that have failed to actually replicate the claims that Bluma Zeigarnik made. Specifically, the idea that we remember tasks better if we've had an interruption. An example being a child doing their homework and being allowed to take a substantial break before finishing it, as opposed to finishing it all in one go. The jury's still out on whether or not that's actually true. But there is a concept that has kind of arisen as a result of Bluma Zeigarnik's work, which is called the Ovsiankina effect, and that more closely relates to what I'm describing here. This idea that there's like this mental tension that gets created around unfinished tasks, and that's why tasks that revolve around repetitive loops are often hard to stop because that tension never gets resolved. Anyway, I just wanted to make that note real quick, cover my bases, make sure I'm being as academically accurate as possible. We can move on. The point is, incomplete tasks will constantly nip at you in the back of your head. That's the genius behind Schedule 1's design, and what makes it so addictive. There's always an incomplete task or an unrealized goal. The game is actively working against you, not just in your quest for optimization, but your quest for closure. Now, all that psychological mumbo-jumbo might not mean a whole lot to you. All you know is you're absolutely rolling in the dough by this point of the game, and with all this extra money, not only do we shore up our enterprise, but our armory as well. We'll make quick work of eliminating the Benzie influence across the entire town, and now that we've crippled their business, it's time to finish the job. Zugzwang. It's a chess term that originates from German, meaning compulsion to move. It's a situation or game state in chess where any move the player can make will only worsen their position. It's sometimes defined as the moment a player knows they will inevitably be checkmated. For the Benzies, the game was in Zugzwang the moment you secured your footing in all regions of Hyland Point. Once you had customers in every region, any attempt they made to stop or slow you down could only be used to strengthen your own position. A thwarted raid results in more influence for you, competing dealers make for easy targets, and your mastery of the game systems means you're making a better product for more people. Now we approach the climax, the exact moment of the game where we go from Zugzwang to checkmate. With some help from Uncle Nelson, we leverage our new strong connections in town and concoct a rather explosive plan to go on the offensive and attack the Benzies cartel at their seat of power, Hyland Manor. All that's left for us to do now is plant the bomb, find a good vantage point, and enjoy the fireworks. It's finally over. Hyland Point now belongs to us. But there's another side to this story. Something far more cynical occurs beneath the surface. It's checkmate in favor of the protagonist of our story, but as the player of the game, it means something entirely different. With your perpetual enemy now defeated, assuming you've made dealing with the police a non-issue by now, there's now nothing holding you back from ruling over the drug trade of Hyland Point with an iron fist. There's no more sudden interruptions, no more story objectives to complete. The only thing that's left for you to do is to wait for the manor to be renovated before you can purchase it for yourself. One more disruption, one more routine reset, before all that awaits us is the perpetual loop we've now embraced. This is the Zugzwang moment between us and the game itself. No matter what we do, we are beholden to the cycle and the loop. You own every facility in Hyland Point, and they're operating at maximum efficiency to produce the specialized products Hyland Point has now come to expect from you. From here on out, the goals are arbitrary. Perhaps you just like the idea of making more money and filling your properties with ridiculous trinkets. Maybe you dedicate yourself to experimenting with different mixes and combinations of product, or maybe you just leave it all up to your dealers and decide to enjoy the finer things in life. At least as much as the game offers you. But regardless of what path you take, the reality remains the same. You have to keep supplying your facilities with the supplies they need to operate, and that means you're constantly stuck in the loop. From here, you only have two choices, and both could be considered a degradation of your position in this psychological game of cat and mouse. You either perform the next step of your routine, surrendering yourself to the cycle and continuing to run in place, or you concede to the Red Queen and exit the game. Zugzwang. Whew, okay, that was a lot. If you're still watching by this point in the video, thank you. The reason why I wanted to go over a condensed playthrough of the entire game is because I wanted you to feel the flow of the game and the presentation of the design tricks as they are presented to the player. Now that we've gone through all of that, let's unpack the analysis. In my previous videos, I discussed how the lack of friction has made games less engaging and more boring, especially in the MMO genre. This video is to present a case of the opposite effect, when the lack of friction can still create a lot of engagement. Now, I'm not saying Schedule 1 doesn't have friction, it does, and we talked about it, but it also exists in the form of constantly having to revise your routine and playstyle as you're given more tools to work with. Every new property is a disruption that causes us to change how we think about the game. Every new product is a new assembly line to develop. Finally, friction exists in the form of the Zeigarnik effect. We're driven by our ability to see the current task done and our gameplay goals achieved. But all that friction is temporary. We are destined to overcome it, optimize our current position in the game, and let a natural state of flow wash over us. This is why games like this can be enjoyable. It's not the high-octane, dopamine-injecting kind of fun we usually think of when we think about games, but it's still deeply satisfying. It's kind of like comparing an action thriller film to a video of sand cutting. Both are enjoyable, but in completely different ways for completely different reasons. Schedule 1 has decided to lean into a minimalist approach of friction, but also embrace the inevitability that the player will learn the game and optimize its systems. The game is fun and enjoyable because it's designed around that inevitability instead of against it. The enlightened player will realize that the Red Queen's race was never a competition, but a collaborative performance. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. I'm almost at my first 1,000 subscribers, and it'd mean the world to me to reach that first milestone. Videos like this take a lot of time and resources to make, so if you found this one informative or enjoyable, consider supporting me by becoming a member of the channel, subscribing to my Patreon, or just buying me a Ko-fi. Your direct support helps me keep making and improving these videos. Members and patrons get exclusive behind-the-scenes access and extras. And you can also catch me on Twitch. Check out the links in the description for more ways to stay informed and connected to what I'm working on. Thanks to this month's patrons for their support. As always, take care of yourselves. And don't forget that I love you.